If you've scrolled on Chinese social media these past few months, you've likely come across images of Palestinian flags and Chinese characters for freedom and peace flying side by side. In countless of posts and comments, many people in China voiced their support for Palestinians. It's a striking contrast to narratives you might see in Western media, especially legacy and mainstream media. So, why do so many Chinese, from everyday citizens to officials in Beijing, lean pro-Palestine over pro-Israel? Just as a quick note, I'm going to split this up into two sections, since reasons why the average Chinese citizen is pro-Palestine is very different as to why the governments in China support Palestine. So, to start off with, going straight to the point, the biggest reason as to why so many netizens are against the occupation of Gaza and the killing of innocent civilians is because of the identification Chinese people have personally with the war. Up until the end of World War II, China had what was called the Century of Humiliation after a brutal invasion by Japan. And so currently, for many, Palestine has resonated as something similar to China's past struggles as a nation facing occupation and invasion by stronger foreign powers. This image was actually fairly viral on Chinese social media. On the left side, it shows the IDF pointing guns at a Palestinian child. And on the right, the Imperial Japanese Army pointing guns at a Chinese child, with the bottom text translating to, "Why should I speak up for Palestine? Because I see China in the past." And there's actually a very specific moment in history Chinese people draw comparisons to. The Nanjing Massacre in 1937. The city of Nanjing had been invaded by Japan, and the Japanese won. Despite this, the Japanese army entered the towns and killed over 200,000 civilians, including women and children, under the pretense that there could be members of the army hiding amongst the civilians. And so, just to be safe, better wipe them all out. Which I'm sure you can see the parallels. And so standing with Palestine has become a moral stance grounded in Chinese anti-imperialist identity. Chinese people also vastly do not believe in any particular religion which has a god create the world. Less than 10%. Like, the Buddha is just literally a chill guy, and so many people have adopted the scientific theory of the Big Bang and evolution, rather than accepting the idea that Israel is some kind of land promised by God. For example, this Chinese netizen questions why people of such light pigmented skin are living in a land with such harsh UV rays, whilst their neighbouring countries, as well as Palestinians, have a darker pigmented skin, despite the fact it takes 20,000 years for skin pigmentation to change, not 3,000. More defense of Palestine can be seen on Weibo, China's Twitter-like platform, which has been bursting with pro-Palestinian sentiment. When the Israeli consulate in Guangzhou posted about a Chinese-Israeli woman kidnapped by Hamas, the reaction by the people was hostile, but not towards Hamas. Don't even use the word China, one user snapped, angry that Chinese heritage was even mentioned. Others piled on again by comparing Israel to Imperial Japan, as well as comparing them to a specific Austrian painter. So essentially, calling Israel this implies that the Chinese people see them as the aggressor. Chinese netizens also love to remind the world of Du Zhaoyu. Who's that? A Chinese UN peacekeeper who was killed by an Israeli airstrike in Lebanon in 2006. It's the name that pops up often in Chinese forums about Israel, the subtext being, we Chinese have even been directly harmed by Israel, and we haven't forgotten. It again adds a personal patriotic grievance to the list of why many Chinese feel Israel is in the wrong. Now, whilst it's worth noting, nationalism and pride play a role in these online debates, there's an underlying theme of the West is hypocritical in much of these Chinese comments. Many users explicitly blame the United States for the conflict, saying Washington's backing emboldens Israel. One could cynically say some netizens support Palestine because the US supports Israel, a chance to poke Uncle Sam in the eye. There's truth to that. A popular sentiment on Weibo is along the lines of, look how the US condemns China for human rights, but gives Israel a free pass to bomb civilians. Double standards. I'm going to come back to this near the end of the video, so stick around for that. Anyway, this taps into a wall of resentment towards Western criticism. In effect, defending Palestinians has been a way for some to call out Western hypocrisy. So it's both genuine outrage, but also a bit of moral posturing at the same time. And I say that because Chinese public opinion isn't universally pro-Palestine, rather anti-Israel.
是犹太人。如果一个饥肠辘辘的犹太人来到你的面前，而你手中正好拿着一个面包，你出于好心呢，会分一半的面包给这位犹太人，但是这位犹太人他不会感谢你，而是感谢上帝赐给他半块面包，之后他会要求上帝再多给他一些面包，然后这位犹太人就会要求你把剩下的一半的面包也给他，而且还要给他签一个欠条，欠条上写着你欠了他100个面包。 你觉得这个犹太人不可理喻，于是转身就走。但是这个犹太人会在你的背后毫不犹豫地杀死你，并且夺下你的半块面包，用你沾满血液的手指按下欠条，最后他再拿着这个借条找你的亲人索要。这就是最真实的犹太人。
While positive sentiment towards Palestine dominates, there have been some disturbing extremes. China does have extremely strict censorship online when it comes to criticizing the government. However, for the rest, it's actually much more lenient than Western social media. For better or for worse, there's ironically a lot more freedom on Chinese social media, specifically when it comes to saying not so nice things. Anti-Semitic tropes have surfaced within Chinese online spaces in recent years. Now, aside from that video, which went ultra viral, personally, I haven't really seen much of that on my feed. Most likely because my feed on Douyin is not tailored to that stuff, but according to Al Jazeera, a handful of netizens have made horrid comments praising that Austrian painter who I can't mention, suggesting if he had burned all of them, we wouldn't be in all this trouble, which is an appalling remark by any standard. And apparently it got so bad that Chinese authorities had to make an official statement reminding everyone Chinese laws ban ethnic hatred online. However, because of China's lax censorship of the war, unlike the West, a lot of real live stream content of Gaza's genocide is available on Douyin, China's TikTok. For those who have Douyin, if you search up Jiasha, meaning Gaza in Chinese, you can see these for yourself. But I think why so many Chinese netizens support Palestine is for this exact reason. Because Chinese citizens have seen so many uncensored videos, those that would get censored in Western platforms, comments like, "We Chinese must stand on the right side of history," are unlikely being said for the sake of virtual signaling either. So I think at least for China, there's a very clear distinction between those who are anti-Israel because they are anti-Semitic, as they will just freely express hate speech, and those who are anti-Israel because they are genuinely pro-Palestine. But going back to what I was talking about a minute ago, this video has also recently gone viral in China. It shows a restaurant owner telling customers to step on a doormat before coming in, which has the US flag, Japanese flag and Israel flag on the ground, and the video caption being "the three evils of the world." And again, is just another example showing how Chinese nationalism leans towards anti-Israel. Ironically though, since Japan was brought up again, the general sentiment of Japanese people is similar to the Chinese, and even more ironically, is for the same reason. Many Japanese people have compared the death of civilians in Gaza to the death of civilians from the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings, including prominent Hiroshima survivor and Nobel Prize winner Toshiyuki Mimaki, who stated, "In Gaza, bleeding children are being held by their parents. It's like Japan 80 years ago." In response to this, Israel's ambassador to Japan attacked the comparison as outrageous and baseless, and said such comparisons distort history and dishonor the victims. Okay, quickly inserting my own personal opinion here. Is it just me that finds this response a bit weird by Israel? Like, why are you telling a Hiroshima victim that he's dishonoring himself? It just kind of rubs me the wrong way. Another incident in Japan occurred in 2024 that made headlines. The city of Nagasaki decided not to invite Israel's representative to its annual atomic bomb memorial ceremony due to the Gaza war. Every August, Hiroshima and Nagasaki hold solemn memorials for the victims of the 1945 atomic bombings. It's traditional for countries' ambassadors to attend, but in August 2024, amidst the Israel-Gaza war, Nagasaki's mayor, Shiro Suzuki, chose not to invite the Israeli ambassador to the ceremony. Why? He was worried that Israel's presence whilst it was waging a war in Gaza would spark protests within the community and disrupt the peace of the event. In his words, it wasn't a political snub, but a decision to ensure a peaceful and solemn ceremony. Of course, no matter how you spin it, this act was inherently political, effectively singling out Israel as unworthy of attending a peace memorial. Funny enough, the ambassador from the US boycotted the Nagasaki ceremony in protest of Israel not being invited to the party. This US ambassador, alongside the envoys from Canada, France, Germany, Italy, UK, and the EU, also argued it was wrong not to invite Israel. Like, it was actually giving off Mean Girl vibes, which again just rubs me the wrong way. Like, why is the US of all people criticizing Japan for who they decide is allowed to come to their memorial for the deaths caused by the US? But anyway, what this tells us is that even in Japan, despite being more aligned to the West than China is, there is still an unease about Israel's actions in Gaza. Nagasaki's stance reflected a segment of Japanese and more broadly East Asian sentiment that is sympathetic to civilian suffering regardless of geopolitics. Considering Japan's history of having suffered nuclear bombings, I imagine the memories of cities flattened and civilians incinerated runs deep. And so one could assume when Japanese people see images of neighborhoods in Gaza reduced to rubble, it's probably not so hard for them to draw a parallel between Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Culturally, East Asia has strong norms about war remembrance and victimhood. China and South Korea, for instance, regularly remind the world of World War II atrocities by Japan. Japan, in turn, has a powerful anti-nuclear pro-peace movement internally, though probably tempered by its alliance with the US. But that's for a different video. These perspectives can sometimes put East Asian public opinion at odds with knee-jerk Western support for Israel's military actions. While Tokyo's national government maintained a careful line condemning Hamas's terror attacks, whilst also expressing concern for the situation in Gaza, this incident at the Nagasaki Memorial showed that there is room to subtly distance oneself from Israel when its actions go against local values and public sentiment. After all, Japan listing Hamas as a terrorist group and being a US ally didn't stop them from effectively saying, Israel, you're not welcome at this peace memorial right now. Another interesting point, Japan did invite Palestine's representative to the Hiroshima and Nagasaki ceremonies, as usual, as Palestine has a diplomatic mission in Tokyo, so only Israel was signaled to stay at home. Like, it's symbolic, but I think symbols matter in diplomacy. Without reading too much into it, at least it seems like Japan's quiet way of acknowledging who is seen as the aggressor in this war. Anyway, okay, I've gone a bit off tangent. So circling back to where we were before, now that we understand why Chinese citizens are so pro-Palestine, why also is the government? Because from what I've found, it's for vastly different reasons.
中方坚定支持建立以1967年边界为基础，以东耶路撒冷为首都，享有完全主权的独立的巴勒斯坦国。
Officially, Beijing likes to present itself as neutral and peace-seeking, but in practice, it leans heavily towards the side of Palestine. Beijing's line has been carefully scripted. Call for an immediate ceasefire, urge restraint, and seek a two-state solution. Chinese officials have repeatedly said that an independent state of Palestine is the only viable way to end the conflict. They also did not join Western countries in explicitly condemning Hamas for the October 7 attacks. You won't find Chinese statements naming Hamas as a terrorist group either. Instead, they stuck and still stick to generic language like urging all parties to stay calm and exercise restraint to avoid further escalation. This neutrality in wording is very intentional, and by reading between the lines of China's diplomacy, a pro-Palestine tilt is very evident. For instance, soon after the conflict erupted, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi was on the phone doing shuttle diplomacy. He spoke both with the Israeli and Palestinian foreign ministers. However, Chinese readouts of these calls had striking differences. With the Palestinian side, Wang Yi emphasized China's firm support for the Palestinian people, even noting that Beijing stands with them. The Palestinian foreign minister actually thanked China for standing firmly with the Palestinian people. Now, compare this with his call to the Israeli foreign minister. The official summary was short and somewhat cold. It basically said, the Israeli side gave their update, and Wang Yi responded with a lecture. All countries have the right to self-defense, but it is important to observe humanitarian law and protect civilians. In diplomat speak, that's a rebuke. It's as if Wang was saying, we get you're upset, but you better not go overboard. He even stressed China's favorite mantra of pursuing individual security at the expense of common security, which essentially was just code for criticizing the US.
面对上述质问，
China firmly reiterates that a durable ceasefire in Gaza cannot be delayed, and that Israel must immediately cease all military operations.
Chinese envoys were also active at the United Nations. China consistently backed resolutions calling for humanitarian pauses or ceasefires in Gaza. Beijing clashed with Washington here. Notably, China vetoed a US-drafted Security Council resolution on October 15, 2023, specifically because it didn't include a call for immediate ceasefire and, in China's view, unbalanced. Instead, China pushed alternative texts that condemned violence against civilians and urged a halt to hostilities. Essentially, China used its UN platform to slam the brakes on what it saw was a pro-Israel narrative, even at the cost of a diplomatic face-off with the US. If you watch CCTV, which is Chinese state media news, or read the Global Times, the Chinese state media newspaper, you will see extensive coverage of Palestinian suffering and pointed criticism at Israel. For example, Chinese outlets prominently report the Israeli strikes on civilians, hospitals, refugee camps, using phrases like Israeli atrocities or Israeli crimes in Gaza. One Global Times editorial piece highlighted that China strongly condemns an Israeli attack on Gaza's hospitals, making sure readers know where China stands. In November 2023, Beijing even hosted a delegation of Arab and Islamic countries' foreign ministers to discuss Gaza. Chinese media proudly noted that these diplomats chose to come to Beijing first, that China is a good friend and brother of Arab and Muslim countries. China has also kept lines open to all parties in the conflict, including groups shunned by the West. Notably, Chinese diplomats met with Hamas officials even after the war began. In March 2024, a Chinese envoy sat down with Hamas's leader, Ismail Haniyeh, in Qatar to talk about the Gaza war. Chinese officials reportedly told Haniyeh that Hamas is a part of the Palestinian national fabric, and China is keen on relations with it. This is a stark contrast to the US and Europe, which consider Hamas a terrorist group. By engaging Hamas, China signals it wants to be a mediator who doesn't take orders from Washington's playbook. Of course, Israel wasn't thrilled by this. Israeli officials complained that China wasn't acting like a fair broker and had failed to condemn terrorism. So officially, China walks a line calling for peace and negotiation, but implicitly siding with Palestine. They consistently emphasize Palestinian rights, like endorsing the Palestinian right of return for refugees, and they shy away from any wording that squarely and solely blames Hamas for violence. It's an interesting stance of pro-Palestine without being blatantly anti-Israel, though in practice it often looks pretty anti-Israel in the West. You might be wondering, is this just rhetoric, or does China do anything concrete? In terms of material impact, officially China has only given humanitarian aid and economic support to Palestinians. These goodwill gestures reinforce that image of China being that benevolent big brother of the developing world. And by supporting Palestine on the world stage, China bolsters its leadership image to the global south. Many nations in Asia, Africa, and South America already sympathize with Palestine. China's stance wins diplomatic points with them. It's a chance for Beijing to say, "See, we stand with the oppressed," unlike the US, which stands with the oppressor. This feeds into China's larger narrative of wanting a world not dominated by the West. In essence, supporting Palestine is not just a moral position for China's government, but also strategic. It helps China rally other countries to its side and portray itself as a champion of justice, whilst at the same time painting the US as the bad guy. Now, there's an elephant in the room I must address, and it's about the fact that comments under this video will inevitably be roughly along the lines of, "What about the Uyghurs?" Or, "China doesn't like what Israel's doing." Well, it takes one to know one. Here's the thing, whether or not what's happening to Uyghurs in Xinjiang is actually happening or not is still debated. Western media and propaganda say it is, whereas the Chinese government denies these claims. However, it's not just the government themselves. The independent OIC, as in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, did an audit as a third party and found nothing that backed the US's claims of mistreatment, and even going to the length of commending China for providing care to its Muslim citizens. Along with that, there's actually quite a few Uyghur influencers in China. One notable influencer is Lucifer, who uses a VPN to go on sites like Omegle and talks to Westerners and hears their preconceptions of the Uyghur people, whilst sharing his own experiences.
Well, I belong to the ethnic group called Uyghur. You probably heard of that? Yeah.
Oh, Xinjiang?
Yeah, Xinjiang.
It's funny because I heard about Xinjiang and the Uyghur concentration camps, but then I talked to a recent Chinese and they were like from Xinjiang.
Yeah.
And that Chinese person told me, no, that's bullshit.
Because that is bullshit. I'm telling you that too.
That's crazy.
That is all fucking propaganda.
I'm almost believing that, bro.
Essentially debunking America's claims. Now, Whilst this could all be one big conspiracy, and the influencers are a part of a psyop, I'll let you decide what side you wish to believe. The point I'm getting at, actually there's 2 points. Firstly, yes, if China is mistreating their Muslim population, then it would too make them a hypocrite. But being a hypocrite does not take away from the fact that they are still trying to prevent killings of innocent civilians in Gaza. Just like how the US is called a hypocrite for criticizing China. If what US propaganda says about the Chinese government is true, then as an isolated issue, of course it would be a good thing and quite brave that government officials in America are willing to call out China for human rights violations and trying to save lives, despite knowing that they will inevitably be called a hypocrite for helping to fund the genocide in Palestine. And number 2, since the people in China don't believe that their government are mistreating Uyghurs, they at least don't feel as though they are being hypocritical when they and their government show support for Palestine. In the last 3 to 4 minutes of this video, I really want to highlight here that Zionism is not the same as being Jewish. And in reality, there's a long history of Zionist anti-Semitism. Not every Jew supports Zionism. Just take the subreddit r/Jews of conscience as an example. For a matter of fact, and you can do your own research on this as well, many ultra-Orthodox Jewish people are anti-Zionist, and some of the biggest supporters for peaceful resolutions are from these individuals. One of the most powerful moments I've seen from this recent conflict was a video showing Israeli police attacking ultra-Orthodox Jewish residents in Jerusalem. According to reports, the police were supposedly responding to Palestinian flags being flown in the area by these people. So that's interesting, seeing how Israel treats their Jewish population when they refuse to conform. There are 2 primary groups that merge Zionism with Judaism. The first includes far-right racists and opportunistic anti-Semites who use Israel's actions to stereotype all Jewish people. The second group consists of Zionists themselves, who try to dominate the narrative around Jewish identity and harshly dismisses Jewish anti-Zionists. Some even show contempt for Holocaust survivors and their descendants. For example, Israeli influencer Hillel Fudd posted on Twitter that the weak Jew who was led to the gas chamber now has been replaced by the new Jew armed with F-16 fighter jets and Merkava tanks, suggesting that Holocaust victims died because they were weak, and modern strength redeems that. Now, I'm not one to get offended on behalf of someone else, but once again, doesn't this just feel a little bit weird? I made this video because of something I saw almost 2 months ago now. Something that has stuck with me ever since, more than anything covering this topic. Israelis holding a barbecue near the Gaza border whilst Palestinians were dying from a food shortage crisis, knowing quite well that the scent of cooked meat would travel across and be smelt by the Palestinians, yet would remain starved. It's a very small thing compared to all the other atrocities, and I don't know why exactly this has been the thing that's stuck with me for so long, but it just pisses me off. Like, even if you've adopted the idea that the death of civilians in war is inevitable, there is no context where the celebration of innocent women and children starving is acceptable. And honestly, if I had to guess, it's videos like this and footage of Israeli civilians blocking humanitarian aid trucks into Gaza, and even when they do pass, the food has been spiked with oxycodone, will be the actual things that haunt future generations, the same way these videos have done for me. Much more than what any of the uncensored war footage I've seen on Douyin could do. As I still don't do YouTube full-time right now, though I would like to one day, I've been thinking whether or not I should monetize this video given the topic. But I've chosen to run ads, but to donate the ad revenue from this video to help those affected in Gaza. As well as that, below in the description are links to 2 organizations which I believe are doing amazing work. If you can, please donate. And finally, just one last thing. You might have realized this video doesn't have a sponsor, unlike my last few. And that's because given the nature of the topic, there's not a whole lot of brands that want to be associated with this. Therefore, to fund future videos that cover controversial topics like this, I've made a Patreon, which if you'd like and are in the position to do so, you can help me out directly by becoming a member there. There's a whole lot of perks which you will get and will be listed out there, and prices start from just $2. And for this first month as well, the money I get from Patreon will be donated towards the PCRF to help those in need in Palestine. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and like the video. I'll see you next time.